We have got the football in focus, teed up indoors on Battleground, home with Davis Troxler, home with Natalie Garcia, and a lot of good people out tonight checking out the show. We got Bryant Roche with us tonight too. Bryant's with us. And think about Bryant from the News and Record, along with Natalie Garcia from Yes Weekly and other great publications. Most impressive win by the area teams, local teams, so far this season, or maybe last week. What's the most impressive win last week? Who'd you see biggest win, best win last week?
Biggest win last week. Well, I'll tell you what, in my mind, I felt like we didn't see a whole lot of surprises last week, just being truthful. But if I had to pick one, most impressive in my mind, I think it was Page.
Yeah.
I know you just had a couple Page people on there, but I think for me, I had to see it live. I saw them against Dudley to start with. New coaching staff, think they didn't fully know what they were doing. But I think seeing them live and in person, seeing the strides they've made, they've definitely generated a much better passing game. I think that they have gotten a rhythm under Kalen Hahn. I think he's a very energetic coach. He's moving them in the right direction. I really think so.
So Page would count there. What about the surprise team of 2024 so far?
The surprise team?
I know who you're going to mention.
I think I got to go Western.
I was going to say WG.
I got to go Western, the most impressive turnaround I've seen so far this year. I got to give the hats off to Coach Timmons and staff at Western Guilford. They've improved a lot defensively. They've got a nice ground game with Timothy Baker. I know you referenced old Tony Baker from Ragsdale.
Baker, the touchdown maker.
Timothy Baker.
Yes.
I don't know how good memories are.
And don't forget R.J. Baker at Dudley, MVP of the state championship game a couple years ago.
And I guess Bryce Baker over at
Bryce Baker at East Forsyth.
Yeah, a lot of Bakers. But anyway,
also Bryce Baker formerly Rockingham County.
That's true. Different spelling though.
Yeah.
Remember, different spelling.
Oh, Dusty Baker for the Atlanta Braves, LA Dodgers. Yeah.
So I think you got to say right now, biggest story, biggest turnaround, without a doubt, is the Western Guilford Hornets, and they could have their hands full against Grimsley this week. I know a couple weeks ago against Northwest, they may have come down to earth a little bit, but
they played a very good second half. They won the second half.
But they did fight. They did fight in that second half.
14-7 second half.
And Coach Timmons, after the game, he said this was not the Western Guilford of old. These guys fought back.
The old guys would have packed it in, right?
That's what he felt like. That's what he said. Said the old guys would have just folded their tent and left. This football team kept fighting, and also they responded the following week against Southwest, who for a little while did give them a fight there, but to see them pull away, I think they've got a winner's mentality, even if they may not have the tools of Northwest or Grimsley. I think they do have a good mentality right now.
I think they got going good for them, too. They got Timothy Baker, the running back, plus they got this Elijah Hayes kid. Elijah's very good, too, plus Caleb Moore, the quarterback, a very good running back. Three guys that can carry the load.
He's a dual threat kid. He's a dual threat kid.
Those guys can go.
I think a couple times that Northwest game, the penalties, they kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit with the penalties, but they can fix up some of those things. And I think if I'm playing against Grimsley this week, I think if I win the coin toss, I'm gonna choose to receive. I know that's a little unconventional.
Well, you don't want to give the ball to Grimsley because they're probably going to score in the first possession.
You don't want them to get the momentum. You can't give Grimsley the momentum.
Right.
So I'm telling Timmons, not that he needs my help, but I'm going to tell him, if you do win the toss, I'm telling him to pick receive in the first half.
Give us some information, too, some advice for the coach and the players. One thing that will cure up all those penalty problems for the offensive linemen. Do one thing, do this thing. It's very simple. Watch the ball. Watch the ball. You can't be offsides if you watch the ball. That's going to take care of those false starts. Just watch the ball. Very simple, right?
If you're on offense, you got to know the cadence. You know what also used to cure that problem?
What's that?
If you jump offside, you do a false start, you're running in practice, you're doing push-ups in practice, whatever, that'll teach you.
Quickly. I think it's weird now, too. The way the game has changed so much, it's now all based on this. It's like doing the analysis used to be, it's now clap and snap. It's all about claps. There's no more, they don't.
The old-fashioned cadence.
It's all clapping now, which is kind of wild. I mean, that's completely changed the game.
Yeah, I mean, I played inside defensive line. I mean, I played some nose, played some three technique, but what it always was for me. It was always the loudest for me because the ball's right in front of me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that you had to block that out because you were the one that heard it the most. Especially back in that day, you had some spread teams, but you had a lot more teams that were running under center back then.
Oh, yeah.
Nowadays, teams aren't even really running under center much.
You don't even see the quarterback center hardly any. In the pros, I guess Andy Dalton has been going under center though, which is really weird to see that because Bryce Young always stood back in the pocket behind the center, and now this Andy Dalton's under center, so and he's having to go a shorter distance to get the ball, to get to the handoff. So that's a lot of crazy things. How about this? Teams you thought might be doing better by this time of the season. That's kind of a negative area we have to go to. You got to touch that base there too, some though.
Teams I thought would be a little bit better
At this stage.
I think I'm going to start with. I'm going to say Northeast Guilford. They lost a surprising game to Western. I'm going to say Eastern started off slow, but I think these last couple weeks, I think they are showing who. I think they're looking more like we thought they would the last couple weeks, but I'm going to say overall Eastern until these last couple weeks.
And then Page is coming around now too.
I think, being honest, I would have said Page would have lost to those few teams to start with. So I don't know if I would pick them just because I wouldn't have predicted a win over Dudley.
Wasn't there a lot of
Reedsville,
fan unrest? The Page camp, a lot of fan unrest to begin the season. And those people, it's kind of funny. It used to be people respond in a positive way. You don't hear about we didn't hear about the negatives. Now you hear about the negatives, you hear about the positives. Those positive Page fans, they should be going bonkers now. We won 2 games, we're 2-0 in the conference. Let's have a parade, let's celebrate and support the team.
I think if you're Page, you're used to state championships.
Yeah.
You see the Marion Kirby label on that stadium. And I think for them, they're not satisfied with beating a couple of teams that are not contenders. They want to see this team play against a contender and win. I think you might see a little more joy if they beat Northwest this week. But I think before that, they still remember the losses before. And I think at Page, those expectations are a little different. You go in that press box, you go in those stands, the expectations at Page are a little different than at some other programs.
And you think about these young kids from Page that are freshmen and sophomores, many of them, they got to be prepared for Northwest because Northwest is veteran players over there. You know, there's some of those big linemen. You've interviewed some of those guys. So Northwest has got a bad taste in their mouth right now after getting embarrassed by Grimsley. Maybe not embarrassed, but getting hurt, getting stumped by Grimsley. Man, this will be a huge game tomorrow at Page and Northwest. Very big game.
I think for Northwest, it might be more mental than physical. Number one, you talked about the Grimsley loss the week before. Is there a hangover? Number two, by the way, they play Northern the next week, who you know is their arch rival. Are you looking ahead? And also remember that last year, Page gave them all they wanted. Don't forget, last year they gave them all they wanted. This is what they call a good old-fashioned trap game. Folks,
headed to the trap.
For Northwest.
Yeah, I heard about that.
No
Yeah.
trap game.
you got to be careful if you're Northwest.
Northwest can make sure they
they're
do the
gonna lose,
homecoming
but you gotta be
festivities. Homecoming festivities maybe on Saturday instead of Friday. Get them away from Friday if you can.
Last year was definitely that trap game feel. If you're Northwest, the pregame speech in the locker room, do not let that happen again.
Who's the team that will play Grimsley the closest this year?
The team that will play Grimsley the closest. Well, looking through their schedule.
Yes. Not worry about the guys they played already.
I was going to say, it may have already happened.
I don't hear about those guys. Those guys are from another county, I think, another country, whatever. What about the guys around our area here in the Guilford County? Who will play them the closest, you think?
In terms of the regular season?
Yeah. What's left? Yeah.
I think the best test for them, is Northern.
Northern Guilford.
I think Northern is their best test going forward. I've had them ranked second in the conference, and I've kind of stood by that. Southeast kind of did play them tough this past week. I do think weather was a factor.
Oh, yeah.
So I give them a little bit of forgiveness because of the 6-0 loss there.
Yeah. One week ago tonight, by the way, too. Boy, don't want to relive that night. That was one rough night.
The weather coming down.
In a tent out there, we're outside in the rain at Southeast in that tent. The water's coming in. We're flooded. How about for Dudley? The same story for Dudley. Who will play them the closest this year, you think?
Playing the closest. Well,
Eastern Guilford last game. That may not be a close game at all either.
I mean, I think Eastern probably is their toughest team in conference. I do, which has happened the last several years. They've had a collision course where they've met at the end of the year. I think Eastern has solved a couple of their problems. Is Dudley too much? Probably, but I think that they are the best team left on their schedule. I do.
What about tomorrow night? We may have touched on a little bit already. The best game we'll see tomorrow night among the teams. You think the Page and Northwest game still ranks maybe to be the best tomorrow night, possibly on the horizon? Kind of looking in, going in.
I really like that matchup. I think that could be a close game. I really do. Apart from that, since I know you've talked to some Page and Northwest people already, I think Ragsdale and Southeast can be a sneaky good game.
Yeah.
Just on paper looking at it. A couple games in Forsyth County I also really like. I know you don't cover them as much, but I think East and Mount Tabor is really a game that people could be looking for. And I also really like the game between West Forsyth and Glenn. I really do.
And that Rockingham County Eastern Guilford game is going to kind of sneak up on people, kind of sneak right past them. That could be a good ball game down at the old Tommy Grayson Stadium at Gibsonville tomorrow night. That could be a wild one there. Coach Doug Robertson doing very good for Rockingham County.
Familiar, yeah. 4-1 right now.
And plus the doggone thing about that is, the crazy is, Tim Baggermary, Coach Eastern Guilford, was on the staff with Coach Doug Robertson for many years at Thomasville, Page, and other places. So, I mean, the old mentor going against the mentee. Yeah.
That is correct. That is correct.
Amazing.
I got to tell you, Rockingham County is 4-1. You look at their resume, all the teams that they've beaten have been teams that have struggled lately.
Yeah.
So I think this is one of those games where you find out if Rockingham County is for real or not.
And you find out if Eastern Guilford
can
get that offense.
They got beat badly by Reesville. That was their one loss, was a bad loss to Reesville. So I think this game is a nice measuring stick for Rockingham, seeing just how good they really are.
It's going to be a good measuring stick for both teams, really.
I think so.
Who's been the top player on offense so far this season around Guilford County? Top player on offense so far this year? I'm going to say it might be that kid over at Grimsley, but who is it? Who do you think? Top player on offense so far around here this year?
In Guilford County.
Yeah, Guilford County area, yeah. It's a big county, 15 teams. What do you think?
I think right now, if I got to pick a guy that's my player of the year, MVP, whatever you want to call
on
him.
offense.
I think you got to say Mitchell Summers.
There you go.
That is
I thought so.
He's played big in big games. They've played tough opponents, and he has lit it up against every opponent they've played. And you look at their play calling, even though Faison is the #1 recruit in the nation, you ask coaches, you watch the film, you watch the games, Mitchell Summers is the guy that stirs that drink. And he had a big performance last week against Northwest when they were playing with the weather bad. You run it 71 yards, 16 yards, had another 5-yarder later in the game. I think you got to give it to Summers. I do.
What about Faison Brandon? Because people are asking a few things about him. You know, he went 4 for 4 passing last week. He's not got the numbers he had last year. They're still winning, beating people pretty bad, and still putting up scores and touchdowns, things like that. But what about Faison Brandon as far as his numbers go? Is it a numbers game for him, or is it a W&L game? Is that all it counts?
I think it really is. I mean, I even talked to him this morning, and truth be told, he doesn't even care. Even the NIL stuff, he's like, it's not stressing me out, the lawsuit, all that.
NIL stuff would have stressed me out, I guarantee you.
He said it's not stressing him out. Being labeled the #1 recruit is not stressing him out. I think this kid, I'm usually pretty good at reading in terms of whether it's just coach speak, player speak, whatever. I think he's sincere. I think he just wants to win ball games, and they're winning. And I asked him, how do you feel about your performance so far? He said, well, our team is doing pretty well. I mean, I think he just doesn't really care about whether he throws for 300 or 84 like I had him against Northwest.
Well, who's their top receiver right now? I mean, the numbers would tell us who is, but from what you've seen, you saw the game last week. You've seen him a couple of times already, Grimsley, what, 2-3 times? Who's their top receiver? Who's that guy stepping out to be that top primary target for Faison Brandon? Man, he's got to go to if they get in a tight situation.
I think Caden Cato is their biggest guy out wide. I think from a security blanket standpoint, I also think he likes DJ Howerton, even though Howerton has been used a lot as a blocker, which I hope people appreciate him a little more, because when Summers does run to the outside, Howerton is a very good blocker as a tight end. So his numbers, if you look at his receiving numbers, they're not going to glare at you, but he does more for that football team than what people realize. I really think so.
Here's another question for you. We talked about Mitchell Summers being a top offensive player in the area of the county so far this year. So say we eliminate Summers, He's top, so we got that covered. And so we don't include Faison Brandon because he's on the same team. They do a lot of the same things as far as production goes in different ways. Who would be the number 2 guy after those couple of guys? Who's it? Offensively wise, who's the other guy? Anybody else stand out so far this season toward the top?
Who's really stood out to me?
Offensive players, yeah.
Justin Guilford.
Yeah, Guilford County top 15, yeah.
Top 15. I'm going to say a couple guys that have really stood out to me just individually. You know what? I'm going to start with Hammock from Northwest has really impressed me. If you go from a standpoint maybe a little broader reaching, Jeriel Cobb from Reedsville. I know he's actually Rockingham County, but he's really performed so far.
Any other Guilford County guys?
I'm going to say Dudley has played a weaker schedule, so it's a little tough to tell, but a lot of those Dudley players have really shined, even if their stats aren't high. So I'm going to say the jury's a little out on them, even though I'm not oblivious to the fact that they've got some players on that team. They've played a lot of running clock games. It's a little hard to tell, but I'm just going to say, just kind of honorable mention, thinking, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, apart from that, Jalen Moore has really lifted up High Point Christian. He's
and
rushed
Timothy
for over
Baker, Western
600
Guilford,
yards.
throw Baker in there.
Timothy Baker, touchdown maker.
Yeah.
Who are we forgetting? I know I'm probably forgetting somebody. At Northern Guilford, they've got kind of that 1-2 punch.
Boy, don't forget our man Jackson Kemp having a very solid year. Yeah.
I guess those are some of the guys that come to mind first.
Interesting case, Northern Guilford. I think now that Amari Akers is back healthy, I think he and Dwight Hall are going to be a great 1-2 punch. And Hall was the old saying goes, the bell cow there for a while carrying the load. So Akers got those two guys together going to be really strong now for Northern.
They got a good offensive line in Northern. Another big boys.
Big Sam Bagley.
The big old Sam Bagley. They got a good old Twisted Sweeney.
Yeah,
got some big old boys on that front. Mm-hmm. And if they don't get a whole lot of love, I'm going to give them a little love right now on Football in Focus, because that offensive line has done a good job at Northern. They also have a nice outside playmaker in Reggie King, who is also capable on the special teams.
Another guy coming on too from the outside with threat is this kid Grayson Council. He's going to be a solid player too out there. Kind of takes some of the pressure off Reggie. You can't double on Reggie as much because you can follow Grayson Council also.
Don't have a one-man show all the time.
And plus that offensive line, got to give those guys credit too. 1 week ago tonight when they kicked those 2 field goals, somebody's got to block those defenders coming in. That guy hit them both. So hey, here that offensive line.
So give them credit. If I'm forgetting somebody, bless your heart.
How about on a field goal attempt? Do you keep the same offensive? You're an offensive lineman. You're more recent than I've ever been. Do you keep the same guys out there for the field goal attempt that you had out there for the regular running offensive scheme? Do you change the positions or keep the same guys out there? Same exact guys?
I say for field goal unit, a lot of times you do just put the big boys up there. For punt unit, I say not necessarily, because on that punt unit, you might want some guys that can run down the field. Now, personal protectors sometimes, often that offensive lineman will be a good personal protector, but in terms of the guys that are lined up on the line for that
those gunner guys?
For the guys that, because you're going to have to run downfield to make a tackle, sometimes you want more kind of, linebacker, defensive end types, guys that can block a little bit, but they can still run down the field. You want some guys that are mobile. So I say field goal unit most of the time, yes. For punt unit, I say not necessarily.
First instinct for the field goal blocking team, the way we used to practice that, I didn't do it much, so we didn't kick field goals. We just mainly kicked extra points. I remember the way the routine went. First, snap the ball, practicing this thing. First, step inside. Everybody steps inside. Does that make sense too? Everybody takes a step inside, blocking inside. Yeah.
Well, you want to make sure the easiest path is a straight line. Mm-hmm. And so when you are blocking, this even applies to pass pro as well.
Right.
You want to make sure that inside rush is taken out first. On that punt, field goal, doesn't matter. The guys that are least vulnerable are the guys that have to go all the way around the edge. You do not want a guy that just comes straight up the middle and blocks your kick.
You do say one key word. If you see a guy on the outside, like an outside guy you mentioned, if he's angling in like this and looks like he's got a big, hard, mean look on his face, you got to say, look out for that guy, right? Somebody's got to get that outside
You do, but
guy.
They say that typically he's the least dangerous.
He's got further to come to get there?
He's got to go further to come, so usually you want to protect that inside first, Same thing on pass pro even. I mean, even though those guys are faster usually when it comes to pass pro, if you do have a blitz coming off, you usually worry about the guys inside first because you don't want a guy just coming straight at your quarterback. It's just faster that
Let's
way.
make it easy for you here, too. We talked about the top offensive player in the county. Who's the top defensive player right here so far this year?
The guys that I would say, I'm going to start off with Bryce Davis.
Oh, yeah.
He's been a problem in his return. I'm going to say a kid that I really like, Andrew Rogers. He's only a sophomore, but I really liked what I saw when he played against Page. He's a menace. He's 6'6", 240. He is going to be a problem for the next 2.5 years, I guess.
Sophomore now?
Sophomore, also started on their basketball team when he was a freshman. I know you probably
He was
you
a
covered
force,
him.
yeah.
Andrew Rogers, I really like what I've seen out of that kid. That whole defensive front for Dudley, honestly, has been very good. Jaleel Elliott on the other side has also been very good. Throw in Jordan Ratliff. They've got Dakota Brown's a rotation guy on that team, and he would be an easy starter across the board anywhere else. I think they have over 35 sacks right now as a unit, which is crazy good. So I'm going to
I was
give
going to
that
ask
group
that
a
guy
kudo.
before Christian Brown that question. He got caught up in a lot of different things. You played defense some too, right?
I was more defense than offense.
Okay,
actually,
as a
yeah.
defensive player, what's your most favorite play on defense? Would it be the sack, the tackle for a loss? Would it be the interception? What would it be, your favorite play?
I think for me it was a run play where you just unloaded on that running back and he had nowhere to go. I think the sacks sometimes you get gratification to an extent, but in a way the quarterback, isn't always facing you or whatever. I felt like for me if you really got to unload on a running back on a run play where an offensive lineman was legitimately trying to block you and you just beat him off the ball. Yeah. I think you got gratification from the turnovers because your offense got the ball back. So, I think in a way you got more gratification, but I think from maybe a selfish point of view, I think it was maybe a time you unloaded on a running back. And maybe if he did fumble the ball and your team recovered, maybe.
Yeah, fumble recovery is big. Those are all big. My favorite part would be the interception because I could have a chance to do something with the ball once I catch it and can try to run with it somewhere.
I guess it was more for a defensive lineman.
That was more. It
was more of a rare
But you
occurrence.
could get a pass deflection though occasionally.
At time.
Yeah.
So I guess the rarity made that special.
Easier question than the last one I asked. This is the most easiest question of all. Where will you be tomorrow night, and what will you be doing? What will be Bryant Roche's ETA tomorrow night? Where will you be in the ETA for Bryant Roche tomorrow night? Where will you be?
All right, so I will be at Smith and Dudley. Played at Smith at 7 o'clock Eastern time.
Is that kickoff 7 then?
7
It's
o'clock.
a good thing to keep in mind because it's also, I think, their homecoming there too. And 7 o'clock kickoffs, a half hour earlier than the 7:30 kickoff does make a difference.
So it's a 7 o'clock start.
Beware, yeah.
And so it'll be at the Golden Eagles Nest.
Claude Manzi Stadium. He gets very few mentions. We mentioned Bob Jamison, mentioned Marion Kirby, even my good friend Bill Slate in the Southeast, and Tommy Grace in Eastern Guilford, and Tony Simeon at High Point Central. But Claude Manzi,
So
they call that the old Claude.
I have been to the stadium for functions, for meetings, etc. But this will be my first actual football game covering Smith because every other time I've covered them playing at somewhere else. So this will be my first actual game covered at their football field, although I've covered other sports at
They
other,
had some facilities years ago, a little bit left to be desired. They've improved them quite a bit now, but boy, there was a time they had that visitor side press box was the press box, and man, they had no press box on the home side back in the old days. It was like an old wooden building on the visitor side. Man, in the wintertime, it was so cold in that place, you thought you were going to freeze to death. It was crazy in that old press box. Remember one time I dropped my microphone out of that press box, fell all the way down to the ground. That was like 1998, I think it was. Still got the same microphone today. Still works, no problem. It's getting the job done. One more thing before you leave. I'll talk to you on the phone. It says drop this book by your way. So there's the old book. Drop that in your hands. You can take that and read that when you get a chance. Good little basketball information there. Check them out. Yeah. That's what it's all about.
And at Durham, talking live on the radio. He's written books too, apparently.
He's been up and down the road
For all the good folks that, all the viewers out there.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
the old 16 Wemma, too. Yeah.
A book by Andy Durham himself.
So basketball love, basketball read, yeah. So we'll see you. You'll be there tomorrow night. You'll see our man Dimitri Morrison. He'll be there. He'll be broadcasting that game on Greensboro Sports Radio 2. Dudley and Smith tomorrow night. So he'll see you there. We'll see you soon. Talk to you soon. Appreciate you coming as always. Excellent job.
Mr. Durham, always a pleasure.
Tonight we had James Summers and Dylan Summers' son, and we had Christian Brown, and we had Bryant Roche, and we got Ian out of that next. So far we're 3 for 3, 4 for 4. Not too bad. Percentages are good tonight. Oh yeah, very good lineup. Next man up.